Welcome to the third annual conference, Youth Resiliency, Hate, Racism, and Radicalization. I wanted to take the chance to welcome you and to reiterate OISI's support for the important work that Maidanta does, for Mahad Youssef and his team at Maidanta. OISI's been working with Maidanta since, I think, 2014, roughly 2014, but I think a little bit into 2013 as well. So close to 5 years that we've been engaging with Maidanta and supporting its work. And this was based on the recognition that there's a need for greater collaboration between communities, community agencies, and education researchers in dealing with the many challenges of immigrant settlement and its aftermath, and in particular, challenges facing marginalized communities such as those who arrived here fleeing from conflict. So we have been engaging with Maidanta at OISI, various faculty, as well as providing this safe and inclusive space for the important dialogue that's taking place. But we've also supported and been engaged with the 2 previous conferences to this. And we really support and applaud Maidanta's work in terms of settlement services, youth outreach, as well as their implementation of their various projects, including the Rites of Passage, Youth Mentorship Program, and Project Turnaround. And just to conclude then, we are partners with Maidanta at OISI, faculty and OISI as an institution, but we also really support and applaud and want to help nurture the productive collaborative partnerships with Maidanta and other community groups, government agencies here in Canada and abroad. So welcome, I'm looking forward to our conversations. Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to be here, to share with you and to listen and to learn also from you on these very, very important topics of youth resiliency, radicalization, racism, discrimination, and hate. These are very topical issues, very current issues, not just for Canada, but for all countries of the world. For me, it's particularly important that these issues are discussed because youth, maybe not in many Western countries, but in Africa, youth is the biggest population of Africa. Kenya, for example, has got almost 70% of its population below the age of 35. And therefore, we consider any issues touching on youth to be extremely important. But what are we doing so that they become so angry? You give them everything, school, everything, but they still feel not welcome, not part of society, to the extent that they become so angry and they want to hurt the same people who facilitated them and trying to, integrate them in their societies. We must look at that. But for me also, as I live this right extremism, let us not close our eyes. Sometimes we just focus on one side. And again here, the right extremists have taken the same advantage of freedom of expression, freedom of association, to promote discrimination, racism, and violent extremism against.
We do recognize and we must recognize that many diverse and newcomer communities continue to experience barriers to inclusion that must be overcome. And this is a situation that can lead to some youth to be disengaged and to radicalization, as you will discuss today in this conference. So one of the ways that our government believes we can fight disengagement and radicalization is by offering inclusion and opportunity. Our young people should feel that they belong and that anything is possible here in their city, in their country, and that they can live life to their full potential, and that they can expect a bright future.
Who really are our youth that are at risk? So really to go back and examine our presuppositions and to rethink the complexity. To do that, to fight against the increasing social polarization of the space, and to rethink the interface between discrimination, violent radicalization, mental health, and ideological presuppositions. One simple ideological presupposition. In Canada currently, we have a very clear law that prosecutes based on intention to commit a terrorist attack. Intention to. Now, if we start to prosecute every single youth or person who has the intention to do something violent, we're going to prosecute probably everybody. Versus absolute lack of clarity around hate-based violence, hate crimes. There is some work coming on, but I think this should be supported. Absolute lack of clarity around hate crimes, while we know that it's an important risk for violent radicalization.
So there are reasons for alienation, for depression, for hatred. And these, more or less, these are facts, maybe not real news or fake news, I don't know. These are numbers that I've seen, I've witnessed some of this. And it leads to the spread of hatred, it leads to the spread of conspiracy theories. And I think if we don't acknowledge the situation in our interaction with the communities here, if we don't have some curiosity about what's happening to these, to the communities that some of you are from, I honestly don't think we're going to be able to interact credibly.
People who self-identified as Black, particularly youth, more than half of them feel they don't belong in school, that they don't feel welcome in school. And to the point of academic achievement is one of the strongest predictors of social mobility, and while it's not entirely an insulating factor, certainly it's a pathway to success. If we have half of our population feeling excluded from school, we have a real problem.
At the end of the day, what's going to stop people from wanting to engage in violence for any kind of ideological reason, and even non-ideological reasons, if you want to prevent that in the first instance, is good governance. How do we build resilient communities? Not build resilient communities to stop terrorism. How do we build resilient communities? Because that's what it means to run a functioning society. That's what it means to be able to bring in immigrants, make them feel part of the society, and let the entire society benefit and be uplifted by it. Countering violent extremism is what happens when you fail at preventing violent extremism. Countering violent extremism is going to be focused on individuals. Not individuals who are necessarily engaged in terrorism or necessarily engaged in activity that is itself inherently illegal yet, but are going down a dangerous path. That can be gangs, that can be drugs, that can be violence. Then you will need to actually work at the individual level, and that may be off-ramping, that may be interventions, countering. But where we will always have the biggest bang for our buck, and where we will be doing the greatest service, not only to society, but to the individuals at hand, is in the area of preventing violent extremism, moving the needle as early in the process as possible, and trying to inoculate communities from some of these dangerous ideas, trying to identify what is it in a particular geographic area, for a particular community. There are lots of different ways to think about this that could give people the cognitive opening to dangerous ideas, to ideology.
So let me tell you this. Interview respondents in all 3 cities reported feeling discriminated against for a number of often interrelated reasons, including the neighborhoods in which they live, stereotypical assumptions that Somali people are violent and or they are involved in crime or terrorism, And lots of discrimination reported that was perceived to be on the basis of race and religion, and lots of interconnections among and between each of these individual reasons for discrimination. Common sites and situations where discrimination was experienced included the educational system, the labor market, in public spaces, and at the hands of the police and border officials. Our study participants across the 3 cities had a lot to say about the police and a lot to say about their experiences at the border.
The solution to these problems of radicalization, of terror, of deep-seated, quote-unquote, systemic prejudice and racism is a human-to-human approach. We are prejudice is a contagion, and we can actually be the cure of that contagion.
The Hawala sanctions. Hawalas are these companies that wire money from anywhere in the world, and it's been the biggest business for immigrants because it's hiring people, and it was, you know what, a lot of immigrants, when there are crises at home, all of us have left our parents, grandparents, and all that. What we do is we work here very hard to send money. But guess what? We can no longer send money because all the Hawalas, the government of Canada, banned and they closed them. So guess what? The mother who is struggling to raise kids has got also a mother who she sends money every month, you know, to take care of her. The mother, how can she raise a resilient child while herself is so weak? She's worried about livelihood of people back home and is worried about the violence in Toronto or in here in home. So these are some of the issues that we're dealing with.
In 2006, you'll see that on an ethno-specific basis, the rates of poverty, which is, again, a key visual health, social, economic indicator of disadvantage, of exclusion, of marginalization, you'll see anywhere from most of the people of European or Caucasian or background and heritage are clustered at the bottom, roughly about 1 in 10% on average within those communities. And when you track up across all those different ethno-racial groups, and this is on a province-wide Ontario basis, you'll see the Somali Canadian community at 70% rate of poverty.
There are a number of concrete strategies that we can use in preparing youth to recognize and critically engage with hate when they encounter it online, as well as teaching young people to recognize the common characteristics of ideologies of hate. We can also teach them to recognize and decode the various persuasive techniques which hate groups of all kinds use, such as employing misinformation, denialism, and pseudoscience, building group solidarity through appeals to nationalism or religion, casting themselves and their members in a hero narrative, and of course, portraying their perceived enemies as a dehumanized other.